a big part of what we do is like we fight invisibility. Our fight is against the 85% of the ads that just go completely under the radar. They don't even hit the minimum threshold for attention. Our job to you, client, is to put you in that other 15%, right? That's what we're here to do.
Welcome to Any Insights Yet? The podcast that explores the intersection of strategy, inspiration, and branding. I'm Chris Kochek. On today's episode, we hear from John Gibson, head of strategy at the Martin Agency. Over the past 20 years, John has helped shape iconic campaigns for a number of powerhouse brands, including AT&T, OREO, UPS, and Mountain Dew, just to name a few. How he does this is one part science and two parts magic, uncovering those unexpected emotional truths that help people connect with brands on a much deeper level. Throughout our conversation, I love the way John connects the dots between rituals, semiotics, and timeless blue-collar wisdom. In every example, he has this easygoing way of walking you through his team's process, transforming everyday objects like a simple cookie into a much more meaningful symbol. You'll see what I mean when you hear him talk. But we don't just talk about cookies. We go deep into the category of sleep and one of the strangest research projects John has ever worked on. Before we get to all that, though, let's start with some weird and wild stories around America's favorite food, pizza. You guys won Papa John's Pizza about a year ago. What are a couple of interesting or surprising things you've learned about pizza or pizza customers since your team started working on the business?
Everybody loves pizza, right? I mean, who doesn't love pizza? But we had to get more into the real of it, like people's different idiosyncrasies and like the truths of like rituals around pizza and how people do it. But I remember one of them that was interesting was a vegetarian who would consistently order pepperoni pizza, but then take all of the pepperonis off because they just wanted the essence of the pepperoni. They wanted just the oil on it. Right? It was like, it's almost worse, right? Because like you're just wasting it. And then just like things like people who I got to get in my mouth as fast as I can. So like it's going to burn the roof of my mouth every time, but it just hurts so good. It's just like interesting stuff to play with that speaks to this larger thought around it that we kept coming back to. It's just like there's almost like a cult around pizza, like this devotion for pizza, the lengths people go to, like all these like little fascinating behaviors that were around it that pretty quickly sort of started to feel like the audience truth. We just had to figure out where the brand came in on that.
And so where would you say Papa John's was living before, strategically or conceptually? And where is it now?
So the brand has always stood for quality, right? Like the line, better ingredients, better pizza is sort of the expression of that. They've used it forever, like since the onset. And there's nothing wrong about that, but the quality message maybe isn't quite as distinctive as it was 20 years ago, right? I mean, you have now in the QSR space, brands like Chipotle, they're talking about the quality of their ingredients. So I don't think it's table stakes within the pizza category, but it's definitely, there's noise around it. So we had to find a more emotional space, which as we got to know the brand and we kind of understood the process behind it, there was real truth in that promise of better ingredients, better pizza. Like, for instance, like the dough, it's like a 72-hour proving process. It's never frozen. And more captivating, or like really what got our attention, is like there was just real passion behind it at corporate level, but also even in the locations that we visited. There's this devotion between how people feel about pizza and then how Papa John's lives into that. And that's interesting because it feels like an open territory, maybe surprisingly, in the pizza space when you have Domino's, who's more about innovating around the pizza, like how fast can you get it and fixing potholes and those kind of things. And you've got Pizza Hut, which is kind of contemporizing nostalgia, kind of playing on, trying to tap back into some interesting things from their past. And then you've got like Little Caesars, which is more of a straight value place. So it felt like, funny enough, like quality of the pizza itself and the passion and thing that goes into it is that sort of emotional higher ground that we can play with. I think what was interesting is that word better, right? If you consider that an asset, the line better ingredients, better pizza, like how do we attach to that in a new way and kind of give it some urgency? And so better get you some became like the launch line for the campaign, which had that. It was almost a call to action that felt like an extension of what you kind of have in your brain about the brand already.
Give me that ooey gooey, crispy, crunchy, mouth watering. Give me that meaty, treaty, zesty, bestie, garlic saucy. Give me that dippy, doughy, melty topping, pepperoncini popping. Give me that cheesy, saucy, tossy, Papa John's. Give me that holy foldy.
What's one of the strangest research projects you've ever worked on?
I got a good one. I was working on Mountain Dew, and we got one of those briefs from the client, which was it was super exciting, but also impossibly open. Like, we want to be scared. We want to do it first and only. And so we ran right at that, and the team came back with an idea. So what if? How do we actually influence people's sleep? And it's like, well, that's awesome. I don't know. I have no idea how to do it. So we dug into the research around lucid dreaming and dream influence, and found a researcher who was kind of on the nascent end of this whole category and designed a sleep study. And, we sent people like 3 nights in a row, go to sleep. They'd have to wake up 2 hours in, set an alarm, wake up, walk around a little bit, and then go back to sleep, because the science of that is you fall back asleep deeper, you get you into REM. Mm-hmm. And the next morning we would have them journal anything, whatever they experienced. If they did dream, what was the dream, all that, as soon as they woke up, so they could capture it. The surprising part, like the aha, wasn't so much what anyone specifically said. It was just the fact that almost everyone did say, that was the wildest dream I've had in a long time. And we were taken aback because, to be honest, I went into that research pretty skeptical that it was going to work. So I was blown away. The client was blown away. It was like, it was wild.
When we were talking the other day about OREO, you said that when they came to the Martin Agency, there was nothing that was broken about their brand, but there was a bigger opportunity. What did you mean by that?
So this was back in 2012, and the brand had just come off of a Cannes Grand Prix win with Daily Twist. If you remember that, there was a social campaign for 100 days, new pieces of content, little stories told through the cookie, like using the cookie almost as the canvas for something that was commemorating something that was happening in culture. And that was part of an even larger campaign that was about celebrating the 100-year birthday of the brand, and that had been very successful. But it instilled more ambition in the brand overall. It's like, okay, that pocket of creativity, that more contemporary way of showing up in the world, we want that everywhere. So you had to meet or beat that the next year. So there was just, while nothing was broken, there was a lot of pressure. And so what we were tasked with was, how do you elevate the brand into a new space? And so that's exactly what we did. We looked at what has made this brand so successful for so long? And at the core of it has always been the twist, lick, dunk. And specifically, the strategy around that was that the twist, lick, dunk ritual inspires childlike delight. That on the surface was a powerful thing. Who doesn't need more of that? But in execution, however, it had become pretty formulaic. If you think back to the ads of that era, it was always like a grandparent teaching a grandchild how to eat an Oreo. So it had almost become like usage instructions for how to eat an Oreo versus that sort of emotive vehicle that it had been and was intended to be. And then the other part of that is it was because it was so focused, because it said childlike delight, children needed to be in the ads. I mean, we took a look at, childlike delight, the ritual. Really, what is that? And what is that evidence of? We kept coming back to it's playfulness, right? There's something kind of different and special about that. Even above that, there's, when you take the time to be playful, there's something even bigger. For that split second, you see the world a little different. You see the world a little more open, a little bit more, open eyes and a curious heart. Is the way we talked about it then. And that word, the finer point that we put on that was wonder, seeing the world with wonder. And so that felt like a much bigger role for the brand to play, is everybody's capable of that, right? Children feel it very innately, but everybody is capable of seeing the world that way. We just need to be reminded of it. And that felt like a powerful space for the brand to play, is to be that reminder that the world is full of wonder and we are wonder filled. And so wonder filled, the fact this is a cream filled cookie, became like the tagline for the idea.
Mm-hmm. Were there some other words that were like a close second, but didn't feel quite right compared to wonder?
I remember getting to that pretty quickly. I mean, other words definitely we would say in conversation, imaginative, curiosity, like all of that's in the soup. When you and I were talking last time, we got almost to, I think, the tagline before we really understood the strategy or how we understood the system that we needed to put in place to really get to the creative work. And so that became the next part of the journey.
Well, it's interesting because it makes me think of that Mark Twain quote, the difference between the almost right word and the right word is the difference between the lightning bug and the lightning.
Yeah, I love that. That's cool. Yeah.
For those who don't know the campaign or the big anthem spot, right? There's this question, what if? What if you gave an Oreo to Dracula? What if you gave an Oreo to this curmudgeonly person or creature?
Yeah.
Would they be nicer? Would they be kinder? Would they be filled with wonder?
Wonder if I gave an Oreo to a vampire in a creepy show. Would he not act so undead? Would he thirst for milk instead? I just got this feeling that it might work out all right.
That's such a different place from intergenerational instructions.
100%. And there's a story kind of in that too. That's at the time and still at Martin, we're very, strategy and design are very closely linked and we work together, we partner together all the time. And, designers are strategic. They are strategists, visual thinkers. And one thing that we did early on was just going to break the brand down into its pieces. Like today we'd say distinctive brand assets, right? Like the embossment on the cookie, on the florets and the stacked shape, the binary color, black and white, all the different pieces that we had that up on a wall. And one maybe obvious thing that we noticed is that embossment resembles a coin. And so if you take that down into kind of a semiotic place, it's like, well, what does coins, currency, what's the meaning, the significance of that? And, well, it's exchanged for something. It's something you give and you receive. And so, okay, well, that's interesting. And so we landed on this word of, in the kind of a brand role of being a token. So a symbol of wonder, but adding an active statement to that is like sharing tokens of wonder in a cynical world, because you need something to push against. It's like, why does it matter that we're sharing tokens of wonder? It's like, well, because the world can get pretty serious. The adult world can get pretty cynical. We can all kind of close our eyes and get beat down by life and become apathetic and no, take those moments to really kind of remind yourself, like, there's a more optimistic way of thinking about this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even the kid world can get pretty serious sometimes these days with mental health issues, with all kinds of things going on in the world. Kids feel it as well. So I think it's a great bridge between the adult world and the kid world.
Yeah. So the campaign was definitely a departure for the brand. It was a use of animation and music and just a lot of design, like very heavy design work, at the time. And we had a lot of work that took to the skies at the same time. And it was, like you said, Chris, like, I wonder if I gave an Oreo to blank, what might happen? And so it just created this like endless pattern that creatives' brains just want to fill. It's like, ooh, what if? And you start with something that everybody does know. We grew up on, like the Big Bad Wolf, which out of context now looking back sounds pretty kiddie, but there were all these twists to things that made them a little bit more Pixar, less Sesame Street, as we used to say, like a little bit more, adult focus.
Now, I think I have an idea of what you mean by more Pixar, less Sesame Street, but I'd love to hear you unpack that just a little bit. What does that mean? More Pixar, less Sesame Street?
Well, I think, if you have kids and you watch a lot of Pixar movies, there are things in there that are aimed at us. There are things that fly over the kids' heads, right? So like, this is what we were trying to do with Wonderfell. It's like for people of all ages, like the animation was not aimed at talking to kids. It was just an expressive way of showing up in the world. It gave us production capabilities where we could put out more different kinds of things faster. Like there was a lot of very strategic reasons for why we went there, and things like storybook characters were because of their just instant, recognition. I know how that story goes, but now I'm going to give you a version of it that's different, right? So it's like, what would happen if you gave it to him? Maybe he wouldn't blow down the house. Those kind of like alternate realities, just endless storytelling that could be there. But the other part about it was not just the ads themselves, but it was like where they showed up. So placing them in places where Oreo, to that point, are really a category, wouldn't show up. So that launch bump that you mentioned aired in Mad Men. It was like in maybe the second to last season, that really pivotal episode, which, you remember that show was pretty cynical, pretty dark at times, and it made the juxtaposition stronger.
Let me ask you a quick personal question there. How do you avoid getting cynical in the world of advertising?
It's a good question. I think it goes back to a couple things. My dad worked in a refinery, right? So like, I feel like just the fact that I get to get paid using my brain, never would have thought growing up in a trailer park that would be something I got to do, So I think that's a part of it, just keeping your head on straight. But then as an agency, I think is believing in your mission, fighting invisibility. You gotta have some conviction. So I don't know. It's a meandering answer to your question, but I think we try to remember that we're lucky to do this and stick to the mission and know that there's going to be tough days in advertising.
That's so well said, John. Thanks for sharing that. So back to Oreo. You guys land on Wonderfilled for the US. Everyone's excited. You unlock all this growth. And then it's time to take this idea to the rest of the world, right? How did Wonder translate in some of those different markets?
That was a challenge, right? So like in certain markets, I believe France, it was something more close to imagination. In China, I won't attempt to say it in Mandarin, but the intended meaning behind it was like filled with wonderful sharings was how it like back translated into English. So what we ultimately did together with the clients was take a step back and, okay, this has taken us to a new space as a brand, the tone of it, the kind of creative license, like all of that was good. And we wanted to retain that. But we needed to get to a place where there could be a little more discipline around how we create this platform. In the research that we had done in all these different markets around the world, the one thing that was consistent and consistently desired was more playfulness. So that was something that had always been a part of the strategy. It had always been a part of the brand, more importantly. And then it was something that could be better translated in markets around the world. So the platform evolved to where it is now, which is stay playful. So the same way that the brand would encourage people to see the wonder, now we encourage people to look for those moments for playfulness in their daily life.
So playfulness was this honorable mention in the mind map word association game, and then it got pushed into the spotlight for global purposes.
Yeah, I mean, I might reframe it as say it was the connective tissue that led to this kind of bridge from the functional side of it, but the very important brand asset and that emotional feeling, which we didn't walk away from the emotional feeling. That's still the ambition. It was just the word itself, that language was just increasingly problematic. But the Stay Playful has allowed us to really continue and push and get deeper into a lot of things where the platform has become much more expansive just over time. It affects the product. It affects the packaging. It affects everything, not just the advertising.
That's a great segue to Lady Gaga, right? So how did you guys come up with the Lady Gaga limited edition cookie? Was that something that came from Oreo, or how did the Martin agency help take that idea to the next level?
Yeah, so the strategy underneath it is like we have different parts of culture that we explore through the lens of playfulness, and music is one of those. And so the program of Sing It with Oreo was the program. And that was just based on a truth that sometimes it's easier to express emotion in music than it is in spoken words. And so there was a technical component. People could go onto a website, input the message that they wanted to say, and it would auto-tune their voice doing it, and you could send it to someone. Oreogram is what it's called. And when you attach a celebrity to that, obviously it gives it a lot more stretch and scale and cultural significance. And so Lady Gaga, who had a new album coming out, I believe it was Chromatica, she participated with that. And then her album was really sort of the design brief for the packaging. That and then in the cookie itself, which I believe was a golden Oreo with a green filling. And so with every one of those programs, there's always a limited edition cookie. And we're very much involved in that R&D process and getting to play with that and suggest things. And the brand, that's what we've always loved about working with Oreo, is they're very open to that. And yeah, that's the genesis of that one specifically. But like more recently, we did a program with Coca-Cola. It was all about these two iconic brands being best friends. And that was based off of just sort of an insight around friendship, and particularly amongst Gen Z, where unlike maybe our generation, where you really work into like calling somebody your best friend, that's going to take a while. That's going to evolve. But today it can happen in 3 minutes, right? It's like, oh, I see you, you see me, we're BFF. And so it was just right out of the gates, Oreo, Coke, like shot out of a cannon, we're BFFs. And there was just beautiful design work done around that. The limited edition cookie was a Coca-Cola flavored Oreo, and then vice versa.
Did you guys ever consider Oreo and Guinness as being best friends?
I don't know if that meets our standards, Chris, but I wouldn't mind personally. I love Guinness. So,
well, I love what you said earlier about the connective tissue, and I was wondering if you could help bring more connective threads to this for a second, because you just said, playful's at the center. Singing is an element of playfulness. Music is a part of that. Friendship is a part of that. What are some other nodes that come off, or spokes that come off of the center of playfulness?
It's hard to say specifically, because I think we have different rhythms, right? There's playfulness within the product. And so music, movies, video games, like you look for things that, have tremendous global appeal, obviously. You look for fan bases, right? So it's like, okay, that's globally appealing, but how devout is their fan base? Like, is it going to get earned attention? Will people talk about it? And then the other side of that too is it's like, is it surprising? Does it break new ground for the brand in some way? Like, and that's not even exhaustive, but like the kind of questions you ask yourself when you're going down the path of these partnerships.
So it's one thing to work with an iconic brand like Oreo, right? A brand that already has a lot of name recognition. It's fun, it's delicious, it's playful. But let's switch gears for a second and talk about challenger brands. You guys did some work with a brand called Unisom, which is a sleep aid. Is that right?
That's right. With Unisom specifically, that's one that we were right out of the gate super excited about, because the space of sleep is so interesting. I mean, there's so many other players, from mattresses to fitness trackers to wellness things, that are all exploring that space now. And so it's just like creatively felt really rich. The truth, though, is that the brand is outspent by ZzzQuil, which is their big competitor. And so we have to punch above our weight. Like, we have to find ways where we can show up in culture in distinct ways. So the platform for that brand is all about being an aid in the elusive magic of sleep. And so that elusiveness, it's a pretty broad space of like restless realities is the way we talk about it, which isn't necessarily in that like moment when you're trying to fall asleep, racing brain, things that you need to be able to overcome. But it's also things throughout your day that become worries or become frustrations that just get you out of a rhythm and can contribute to sleep things. So that gives you a much larger canvas to play. And so one thing that our team does really well, as part of just how we work, is very collaboratively with the strategists, with earned media specialists and creator influencer specialists, comms and social, and like just the whole unit looking for these opportunities in the world. And so one came up last summer. Hard Knocks, HBO show, if you're familiar, was following the New York Giants, and the owner of the Giants, John Morrow, became a pretty well-known like clip of him, responding to rumors that Saquon Barkley, one of their players, was going to leave and go to the Eagles. And he'd say, I'm going to lose a lot of sleep if Saquon goes to the Eagles. Well, sure enough, he does. And then throughout the season, he had this record-breaking season, just like ran away with it. And every time it became like people started to troll with that clip. It's like, I bet John's not sleeping so well. Well, one of our team members in our Culture Impact Lab, Alex Angert, he is diehard Eagles fan. So it was just on his radar naturally, right? And he can very authentically speak to it. And so he brought that to the team. It's like, I don't know. There seems like there's a huge opportunity for us, given our platform, given our product, to talk about this. What if we trolled the owner of the Giants, and creatives got in on it, and social and strategy, and everybody started working on it? It became like, oh, there's something here. What if we could get Saquon Barkley to actually troll him? And then John Morrow, like, not only did he respond to the ads that we put out there, he did it in a really like lighthearted way. It's like, well, you at least could have had me in the ads, you know? And so it just sort of built and built and built. And there was a lot of earned media around it, which it's an evidence of how a brand can play up and look for those opportunities, for those aha moments out in the world, you know, like, that's something that we of all brands should be taking advantage of.
So this idea of paying attention to the signals, right? That there are these signals coming in from culture all the time. And if you are fast enough and open enough to being aware of those signals, you can attach yourself to them and leverage them in a much bigger way. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of the way we think about brand building, is kind of world building and looking for all of these different spaces where if you really know who you are as a brand, you know what you're for, you know what you stand against, and then you know your audience really well, and you understand their world and the subcultures that they fall into, the affinities that they have, the fears that they have. Like, then you're able to really, with some precision, really spot those opportunities and kind of size those opportunities up front.
So the Martin Agency has been just killing it in terms of new business pitches over the past couple of years. You guys have won JP Morgan, Papa John's, General Mills. And when we were talking the other day, you were telling me how your success as a team at Martin is really because of the team-based approach you guys have. And can you tell us a little bit more about either the Culture Impact Lab or the kinds of feedback loops that you guys create?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of our longtime creative directors, Mike Hughes, passed now, but one of the sayings that he used to have was like, why he was so proud to work at Martin was, I get to do work that I love with people that I love. And I think there's a lot of agencies that would nod along to that and probably not see that as all that unique. But having been at Martin a couple times, there is a real truth in it. And it's not just internally, but it's also in the clients that we work with, the selection criteria for pitches. It's like chemistry. I mean, chemistry is a big part of that success. You know? And I think it comes down to, we're very candid with each other, and we will push in a very diplomatic way. And we are very collaborative from the get. I think part of it is just a reaction to the modern landscape and how you need to work now. But we definitely put an emphasis on speed and provoking very quickly and getting to spaces very quickly that we can then research and prove and disprove and add cultural and audience intelligence to it throughout. But like, let's just get going. I think the flip side of the candor is listening, right? Like, I think we get good marks for listening to our clients and really trying to understand what their business challenge is, what's keeping them up at night, and then responding with creativity to those challenges that aren't always like the assignment. We will do the assignment, but like, what are the other things and the other spaces that we can show that this idea, this platform can stretch? And it's really trying to be sophisticated in showing the possibilities.
And how much of it do you think is it because you've got clients who are willing to take risks, and how much of it is because you guys are just excellent salespeople?
I want to believe it's kind of in between those two in a way. It's like when you really listen and you, in good faith, bring back ideas. That a big part of what we do is like, we fight invisibility. That's our positioning as an agency. So when you buy Martin, you buy that. And so our fight is against the 85% of ads that just go completely under the radar. They don't even hit the minimum threshold for attention, you know? So like, our job to you, client, is to put you in that other 15%, right? That's what we're here to do. And so you start with that sort of agreement. And so we're going to bring in ideas that aren't beige, that aren't going to fall behind. But it's not to get them to a place where we're like, we got to make them brave. We got to make them take risks, as much as it is, the idea should feel right and obvious based on the story you've told, the tension you've built, the business acumen that you've shown.
That's such a classic planner answer, John, because I gave you a framework. I gave you two polar opposites, and you said, the answer is probably somewhere in between.
Yeah, man. You know how it is.
It's the 50 Shades of Gray, somewhere in between. So we're going to move into our speed round, and this is where some of the toughest questions happen, okay?
Okay, give it to me.
What's your favorite pizza?
I mean, Papa John's, but truthfully, stuffed crust. I do love the stuffed crust.
Stuffed crust pizza.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I love pepperoni. I'm pretty basic. I love pepperoni. I like onions. I like olives, the extra cheese, but stuffed crust puts it up a notch.
What's your favorite word in English or Mandarin or any other language?
Ooh, that's good. I like words that they don't have direct English translations. And I think it's Meraki. I think it's Greek. That is about putting your complete self into your work. Like it's like leaving a part of yourself behind, like putting your creativity into what you do. And I just love that as kind of an expression of what we should aim for when we're doing research, writing briefs, like just leave it all on the field. Give it your all, because you're asking for creatives to give you their best. Another one's wabi-sabi, like that Japanese word, like that celebration of imperfection and impermanence.
Wabi-sabi, not wasabi, but wabi-sabi.
Wabi-sabi.
Oh, very interesting. I was talking with my daughter this morning on the way to school, and we were talking about the word minutia.
Oh, that's a good one.
What's a subject that you recently got super interested in and you just went down a rabbit hole because of insatiable curiosity?
So my son was just diagnosed sensory processing disorder. And, there was cues and signs and things that obviously led us to get him checked out, get the diagnosis in the first place. But I think my wife and I both just going down complete rabbit holes around how to make him feel more stabilized, more, if you're not aware, it's like it affects just how your brain processes all senses. In his case, like completely imbalanced and just feels uncomfortable a lot of time. And so like our house now is full of swings and vibration tables and all kinds of gadgets to like try and help him.
My son has ADHD, and when he comes home, even before he comes home, those shoes and socks are off. He does not like being constricted by fabric or any sort of material.
Yep.
Speaking of which, what's something your kids have said or done that made you see the world in a different way, or just made you go, huh, that's interesting?
My daughter, I remember when she was just starting to talk, like really put sentences together. We were taking a walk, it's probably during COVID, I think. And she looked up and the moon was, you can see the moon in the daytime. She's like, silly moon, doesn't know it's night. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cute.
Is there a brand whose work you really admire, or that you think to yourself, I wish I'd come up with that?
Okay, two examples. Classic one would be, say, Miller High Life, man. The Errol Morris stuff was just so good. The writing was just impeccable. Like the one that comes to mind, like when you're cutting corners, you're walking in circles. So good. Like just homespun wisdom, like blue collar values that I think are just timeless, would be just as relevant if they aired it today. More recently, I'd say I'm a fan of any ads that do social experiments. And Heinz, the Rethink work, I think it was last year, they gave like basically the open brief to people around the world to just draw ketchup. You draw ketchup, and what pretty much unanimously people come back with is that distinctive shape of the bottle. They even do their best to try and capture the logo from memory. And it's just like, wow, like that's an iconic brand when you're like that firmly planted in people's mind.
What's one of the most interesting jobs you had before you got into the work you do now that has helped you do your job better?
I was a pool boy. I was a bartender. Though I'd have to say graduate assistant. You and I were both graduate assistants at the same time, at the same school. But I think you learn a lot more teaching a subject than you do like taking it in. But I think by being a TA for consumer psychology, And having to teach that class some, like understanding how people make decisions, heuristics, some of these things that are just kind of our stock and trade. It, one, got me more comfortable talking in front of people practically, but two, really making it simple, really internalizing it myself. Like, what is this all about?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that question you ask is at the heart of almost every strategy brief or project, at least I've ever worked on, which is, what is this really all about?
Yeah.
Right? What's really going on here? Last question. What's a piece of advice that you got early on in life or in your career that you still remember to this day or that you think of often?
One of my first bosses at BBO made me write briefs in Comic Sans. And I was too intimidated by him at first to ask why, but I was very frustrated. As someone who somewhat appreciates fonts, it was just the worst. And I was embarrassed every briefing that I went to. But I finally just got up the courage and asked him, like, what is the deal with the Comic Sans, man? And he said, your job as a planner is to, your thinking should be memorable. And until you can do that consistently, independently, your style can at least be memorable. And so kind of back to that Meraki word, like you should put yourself into it in some way, like what format the brief takes, how you lay out the copy. That shows up as care. That shows up that you're as committed to this as the people that you're briefing to do the work. Not everybody has the same talents. Not everybody has the same taste, but it's something I always encourage with the planners here at Martin is to show that passion in some way. Is it a booklet? Is it where you're doing the briefing? Is it the context in some way that you're setting? Like, how are you bringing that a little extra measure to it? That's not Comic Sans, hopefully.
Well, you have put your whole self into this conversation today, John, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your processes, your aha moments, and your insights.
This is fun, man. This is, I'll be honest, it was more fun than I expected.
Awesome. Appreciate it, John. Good to see you as always. Thanks again to our guest, John Gibson from the Martin Agency. If you want to connect with John, you can find him on LinkedIn. If you're looking for even more ideas and aha moments, head over to chriskochek.com. There you can find some of my newest online courses, case studies, and creative exercises for building insights and breakthrough ideas. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to the Lightbulb newsletter. Every Thursday, I share 3 aha moments that are guaranteed to inspire your next project, creative briefing, or campaign. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform and share it with friends, family, clients, colleagues, even your enemies. Special thanks to Michael Osborne at 14th Street Studios for producing this episode, and thank you to Megan Palmer for additional editing and production support. Until next time, keep looking for patterns, finding contradictions, and asking what if more often.